Welcome everybody. I'm attorney Jason Elliott with Bay Legal, and attorney Savindra Miraj is going to be doing a webinar today, Immigration 101. If you have any questions during the webinar, we have a chat box. You can just click the little chat icon at the bottom of your Zoom. If you're on mobile, it might be at the top, depending on which phone you have. Feel free to put questions in there. We will go over all of them at the end. Or if it's relevant, I'll try to alert Savindra during the webinar so he can answer it as part of his webinar. Savindra?
Perfect. So let's get going here. Thank you everybody for coming. This is the Immigration 101 webinar. Hopefully today we'll be able to understand the right type of visa and just get a better feel for what the different types of visas are and maybe how they can apply for you. So before we get started, just wanted to make everyone aware of some things to keep in mind during today's presentation. Please be mindful of the mute button, turn on your cameras, and then if you have any questions, as Jason mentioned, feel free to drop them in the chat. Or if you really have something that's on topic for that particular slide or topic that we're going through, feel free to just raise your hand or something to alert us so we can address it at that time. Although it's a virtual webinar, I really want to make it feel as personal as possible. Immigration in itself is very personal. It's all related to you or your loved ones. So definitely, we want to be able to see you, hear you, and know what you have to say without talking over one another. So feel free, just alert us, and as long as we're all mindful of one another, we'll be able to talk and understand each other, and that'd be great. So today we have several members of our team present. They're all here to help and serve you. Keegan is our Zoom host. Then we have Octavio and Jack, who are our legal assistants. They'll be able to assist with setting up consultations, giving you more information about the process. And then, of course, we have Jason Elliott, our managing attorney here. He'll be able to hopefully assist with some other topics in the law if you're interested in that as well. So let's get started. My name is Savindra Ganesh Miraj. I'm an immigration attorney at Bay Legal. We're a virtual law firm serving clients throughout California in practice areas ranging from real estate to estate planning to business law, and now we're doing structured petition-based immigration. Our mission is to provide convenient, modern, and thoughtful approaches to legal representation, and I really appreciate you all being here today. Hopefully learn a little more. I know you have a lot going on, and probably most of you are here during your lunch break, so I really appreciate you spending that time with me, at least part of it, and hopefully learning some more about immigration. Today, we're going to talk a lot about immigration law, but not in a way that feels like a law school lecture. I want it to feel practical. I want everything to kind of make a little more sense. And most importantly, I want to give you some sort of clarity because immigration in itself is usually pretty stressful, really daunting, and it's something that can feel very overwhelming. That is until you actually understand the structure behind it. And once you understand the structure, I think it becomes more manageable. So before we jump into the visa categories and different processes, I want to share something personal. Immigration law is not just something that I practice. It's actually something that shaped my life a long time before I became an attorney. My ancestors, as you see on the screen, came from India, and from there, my family kind of went all different directions. But my family moved to the West Indies, Trinidad and Guyana, as you see there. And then later on, they settled in Canada, where I was born and raised. And then me, I eventually came to the United States, and now I practice law here. So immigration isn't just part of my professional life, it's actually part of my family story, not only recently, but actually spanning generations. And if you really think about it, actually, that's true probably for most of us here and most people in the world too. Somebody in their family moved, sometimes by choice, sometimes because they had to, but usually it's in search of a better opportunity. So when I sit down across from one of you as a client, I don't just see the paperwork, I see someone trying to build the next chapter in the family story. So as I mentioned, kind of my own immigration journey began a long time ago, but when I came to the United States from Canada, it was as an international student to study at Brigham Young University for my undergraduate studies. After I completed that, I moved to California to attend law school in San Francisco. Because of this, I spent a number of years on a student visa. And that was probably back from 2015 up until around 2017, 2018. And so it was a very long time. If you've ever been on a student visa, you know it's not just about go to school, you'll be fine, and that's all I need to think about. You actually have to have a lot of things in the back of your head, along with studying and trying to get your degree. You're forced to constantly be aware of your status. Is my I-20 signed? Is my visa stamp still valid? If I travel back home, will I be allowed back in the US? I remember back then I used to travel between Canada and the US, going home between school breaks and whatnot. And every time I would go, I always had to double check every document before I left. I didn't just pack my clothes and everything, I packed paperwork because that was very necessary at that time. That awareness that your life here is tied to documentation, it stays with you. Even now, I'm able to bond with fellow international students and joke about how we always carried our passport with us everywhere. And although I don't do that too much anymore, luckily I'm able to leave it at home now. For a number of years, even after I became a US citizen, I still carried that with me just because I was used to doing that. In 2020, I got married, and that kind of started a completely different chapter in my immigration story. I went through the adjustment of status, filed the I-130 and I-485. I applied for advanced parole so I could travel back to Canada while my green card was pending. And I definitely didn't book flights until that document was approved because I knew one mistake could undo everything that I'd worked so hard for. Admittedly, I even checked my case status on the USCIS website more times than I'd like to admit, but I bet at least some of you, if you've been through this process or if you at least started the process, you can sympathize with me on that. Eventually, after I got married a few years later, I became a green card holder. And with that came more waiting. And as you guessed it, and you probably know, more paperwork. Finally, in 2025, I became a US citizen. So when I talk about immigration law today, I'm not just explaining forms or different visa process to you. I actually understand the waiting, I understand the uncertainty, and understand what it feels like to build your life somewhere new, not exactly knowing how long the process will take or how long or how things will even go. And so hopefully that perspective matters to you a little bit and be able to, be on the same page with things. So today we're going to walk through some major immigration pathways. We're going to start off with family-based immigration, then touch briefly on student visas, employment-based visas, employment-based green cards, and then investment visas. So if you have a family, are a student, an employee, or investor, then you're in the right place today. For each pathway, I'll try to explain what it actually means in real life, not just in the legal terms, and who it tends to make sense for, because immigration isn't one thing. It's actually a system of pathways. And once you identify which pathway fits your life best, things start to feel way less intimidating. So let's go ahead with this. As I mentioned, we're going to start with family-based immigration because this one's pretty common. It's one of the most common pathways uh, with family-based immigration, and actually more specifically, marriage-based petitions are one of the top things that people actually search for and need help with. One of the biggest misconceptions I hear is once we get married, my spouse automatically gets a green card. And that's actually not how it works at all. Marriage gives you eligibility to apply. It doesn't grant status by itself. The process involves filing an I-130 to prove that your relationship is actually valid. If the spouse is inside the US and eligible, you file an I-485 to adjust their status. That's kind of the process that I went through myself. There's still petitions, there's still biometrics and background checks, and there's still documentation and an interview most of the time. If you've been married less than 2 years at approval, which was my situation, you receive something called a conditional green card. And then 2 years after that, you file to remove those conditions to your green card. And usually that's around the time when you might become eligible for citizenship. Here's the mindset shift that I always try to encourage when you're talking about this type of immigration. You're not proving to the government that you had a wedding. You're proving that you built a life together with this person. You're trying to show joint bank accounts, a shared lease or mortgage, insurance policies, photos together over time, and any type of trips you've taken together. Funny enough, I have a story on this one. At the time when I got my interview notice, my wife and I lived down in Pismo Beach on the Central Coast. And so the nearest USCIS office to us was all the way in LA, 3.5 hours away. Although we knew our relationship was not a sham, we'd been together for a long time at that point, we are both chronic overthinkers and spent the week leading up to that interview printing out probably over 1,000 pages of social media posts, pictures, letters, and other memories we had collected and shared together throughout the years. When we arrived in LA, we had a huge banker's box with us, and in it was a binder. That was one of those 1,000 page binders, the really massive ones. And we actually went through and organized everything, all the posts, all the pictures, letters, whatever, chronologically from the beginning of the relationship to the day of that interview. When we sat down, the agent, of course, could tell we were nervous. And I think just to mess with us a little bit, he he said, I believe you guys now just take out 10 pictures and I'll keep them for my report. The USCIS, they are looking at relationships with a magnifying glass each day. They know what the difference is between a real or fake relationship. Before you even step into the interview, they probably already have a good idea of what's going on. What they're looking for is consistency. They just want to make sure that your story makes sense. And the couples who feel most confident in their interviews are usually the ones that are organized from the beginning. Because I've been through this, although the nerves don't go away completely, preparation does reduce your anxiety. Now, I just want to pause here because this is something a lot of people don't think about or don't know about until it's too late. If you are in the US and you're adjusting your status and you leave the country without advance parole, your case can be considered abandoned. And although that word sounds dramatic, it actually is pretty accurate. While my case was pending, luckily I had done a lot of research and found this out. But I did not leave the country to go to Canada or anything until my advanced parole document was approved. Even after you receive your green card, there's actually still structure to your travel. It doesn't just become very free at that point. Trips over 6 months can raise questions. Trips over 1 year require reentry permits, and extended travel outside the country can impact your citizenship eligibility because there's a lot of timing things in place that you have to keep in mind. So even though you get a green card, immigration doesn't stop. It just evolves at that point, so the process becomes a little different. So here we have on the screen, you'll see it's the 90-day fiance visa. This visa, it's a fiance visa. It allows a US citizen to bring their fiance who's from a foreign country into the United States and get married within 90 days. That's the same visa that that show on TLC is based off of. But the 90 days that it says in the title, that's actually the real requirement. Often, once the fiance enters on a K1 visa, they must make preparations immediately and they must get married within that 90 days. After that, there's an adjustment of status for the foreign spouse since now they're legally in the country, at least on that visa, and they have the opportunity to apply and start their process. So, really, it's a two-step process. It's entering on the 90-day fiance visa, the K1, and then it's adjusting status after the marriage takes place. This is great for couples who want the chance to be together in the US and get married here rather than abroad. Now, I just want to touch very briefly on the student visa for international students studying in the U.S. Just because I went through this one myself for a number of years. So there's the F1 visa that allows for full-time academic study, but maintaining your status isn't passive; it's actually an active thing. You have to remain enrolled full time in your course of study. You have very limited work authorization, and any type of unauthorized employment can actually create very serious issues later on down the road. Travel under this type of visa requires a valid visa stamp, signed I-20, which is another immigration document, and then continued enrollment. If you do one unauthorized job, have a single lapse in your enrollment, or one documentation issue at the border, all those things have the ability to create long term consequences. Because I lived through it, that's actually how it shaped how I practice today because there's a lot of different checks and lists I had to go through in my head before I even made a move. So it was really important to keep track of things. Now, I just want to move on to employment-based visas. So this is going to be really applicable, especially in the Bay Area. Those are temporary work visas that allow people to work in the United States, particularly professionals. The most common ones we see in California, and like I said, particularly the Bay Area, is going to be the H-1B, the TN, the O-1, and sometimes an L-1. Each of them has a very different purpose and structure, and the way you can potentially qualify is different as well. So let's start with the H-1B, just because in California and the Bay Area, this one, it comes up constantly. This one, the H-1B, it's for specialty occupations requiring at least a bachelor's degree in a specific field. This is usually engineers, software developers, data scientists, healthcare professionals, those type of specialty occupations and professions. This process is completely employer sponsored, so it's not something you do on your own. It's lottery based and it's temporary in nature. Generally, it's up to 6 years. The reality with H-1B is that there are way more applicants than available visas. So the government runs a lottery system to get approved for a visa. Employers submit registrations. If selected, then they file the full petition. So when someone tells you they're applying for an H-1B, what they really mean is their employer is entering them into a lottery for a chance to apply for that visa. In the Bay Area, many professionals follow the path that I have listed at the bottom of the screen. They go from the student, F1, to OPT, which is a practical training period that you're actually allowed as an international student to get experience in your field. Then they hopefully get a job and get picked in the lottery to get an H-1B. And then eventually they can go for an employment based green card and actually get some status here. Because this is a pipeline step by step, and the lottery is kind of a random competitive process, strategy and timing really matter because these things, they're not quick. They definitely take time, so you have to prepare for that. For Canadians and Mexican citizens, there's also something called the TN visa. It's an agreement between the US, Canada, and Mexico. And because I'm from Canada, this actually is applicable to a lot of my friends and family members who either now work in the US or are wanting to. So it pretty much allows for certain professionals. There's a list of them actually, but it's usually things like engineers, accountants, scientists. It allows them to work in the US. And unlike the H-1B, this is not subject to any kind of lottery system or cap. That makes it really attractive for North Americans, Canadians, Mexicans working in tech so that they can come and work in the hub of tech, the Silicon Valley. However, this is employer specific and doesn't automatically transition to permanent residency. So, again, with any of these things where you're getting employment through visas, uh, you have to really plan out things and really think ahead. Next, we have a fun one. This is the O1 visa for individuals with extraordinary ability. Sometimes this is called the TikTok influencer visa. Extraordinary does not necessarily mean you're a celebrity. It means instead that you can document that you're among the top percentage in your field. Think of things like awards, publications, press coverage, major contributions to your field, or even just like crazy high compensation. In California, this category has recently exploded, uh, and it's expanded much further. beyond even researchers and executives like it normally would have been before. Even social media influencers can qualify under the O1B if they demonstrate sustained acclaim. They have to prove things like brand partnerships, media recognition, high engagement metrics, and crazy significant revenue tied to their platform. So they actually have to show sustained revenue, they have to show popularity, and things that actually make them out to be a business, if you really think about it. So when people call it the influencer visa, there is actually some truth to it. But again, documentation is everything. This is going to really be a system based on showing what you got. You have to show what you have, you have to prove what you have in order to obtain the benefit, which would be a visa in this case. So it's not about popularity, it's really about proof. So now let's take kind of a step back from temporary work visas. And I wanted to talk more about permanent residency through employment. This is when status actually starts being more of a benefit. It's more something sustained. So the types of employment-based green cards we have are going to be the EB1, EB2, and EB3. Those are the main categories, and they're all kind of long-term immigration pathways. They require planning and they require patience, just like a lot of things in migration. So the EB categories, like I mentioned, there's three of them. The EB1 is often for extraordinary ability individuals or multinational executives. And in some cases, it allows self petitioning. The EB2 is going to be for advanced degree professionals. There's something called perm labor certification that's required, and there are some national interest waivers for certain high impact fields like AI and biotechnology. Then the EB3 is for skilled workers and professionals, and also requires a perm certification. So this perm labor certification is something really important, and it can come up in a lot of different employment-based categories. It's essentially something where the U.S. employer has to test the U.S. labor market and prove that they're trying to hire somebody foreign, but first they have to figure out and see if anybody in the U.S. could be qualified for the position. Only after they prove that can they hire the international person. That process alone can take over a year before a petition is even filed for immigration. So another thing we also have to think about is the per country caps, which can significantly extend wait times. For individuals born in places like China and India, where there's very high demand, visa backlogs can significantly extend wait times. There's not a short process involved in this stuff whatsoever. It's something that requires strategic approaches and requires a lot of patience. And often it requires a backup plan too, to be honest with you. So before we wrap up things, I just wanted to briefly touch on another important visa category. This is going to be the investment visas. Not everybody comes to the US through family or through employment or as a student or whatnot. Especially in California, entrepreneurship is another major pathway that people pursue. This is the E2 visa, and then there's also the EB5. The E2 visa allows someone from a treaty country to invest substantial capital into the US business market and actively manage it. It's not a passive investment by any means, but it's actually for serious entrepreneurs that really want to start up something and make a difference to drive the US market. The EB5 is a little different. It provides permanent residency through investment, typically around $800,000 or more in investment, and the requirement to create at least 10 full time US jobs. You must document source of funds, you must actually create the jobs that you're mentioning, and the investment must remain at risk, meaning it's an actual volatile business. Immigration and financial planning, this is kind of the intersection between those two. You need to figure out the financial side and the financial side can then translate to getting an immigration benefit. So that was kind of a lot of information in a short period of time, but just wanted to leave some final thoughts with you before maybe some questions, or if anybody wants to explore more about their specific immigration situation. What I really want you to take away from today is that immigration is structured. It may feel overwhelming at first, but once you understand your pathway and which one is the right one for you, it becomes much more manageable. From student visa to adjustment of status to travel permits, green card, citizenship, I have personally walked the journey on my own. And if you're navigating the process on your own, you probably know it can be overwhelming, but preparation and strategy make all the difference. And I really feel that immigration is something that's too important to approach casually. So if you ever feel like you benefit from guidance, I'd be honored to walk the journey with you. And so we have a couple of team members here that can help to get that organized. But first, before we go there, just wanted to see if anybody has any questions. We're going to check the chat. Also, if you do have any questions, you can feel free to put your camera on or speak up or raise your hand, and we'll address each one in turn.
Okay, so attorney, we actually have a question on the chat. I'm gonna read it to you. This is from
Mhm.
Erica. Is it possible to apply for adjustment of status under EB2 while the asylum is pending?
Yeah, and I think an important part of that question I see as well is a note about the NIW. This is probably a question where you'd probably benefit a little better from a consultation, just because the facts, especially when we're talking about asylum, that's a very tricky situation, and there's a lot of requirements to meet the nexus necessary to even be approved for the asylum process. So I think something like this is very fact specific. We'd probably want to talk more in depth about it. So I'll hold off on a full response, I think, for now.
And on that subject, everybody, I think it comes up in the slide, but everybody that attends today, we're waiving the consultation fee with Savindra. So if you do have something like Erica that requires more detail, just get with Octavio or Jack and they'll schedule you an appointment with Savindra.
Yeah, that's a great point. Generally, the consultations are $250, but for anybody that attended, like Jason mentioned there, want to be complimentary.
Okay, Michelle is asking for the I-130. Do you have to do an adjustment status at the same time?
So the good thing about the immigration process is that a lot of the forms they're available at the same time. You can actually file everything simultaneously. So if we have a petition packet, which the I-130, we can file that adjustment paperwork at the same time, just so that we not necessarily expedite the process, but that everything is in front of the immigration officer when they're reviewing the file. So it's not necessarily a requirement. I know your question says, do you have to do it? It's not a requirement, but it's a good practice. Just because, as you know, if you're mailing things in or if you're doing things online, the waiting times are just insane. And so the better thing you can do or the most you can do to expedite the process is just going to be better in the long run.
Michelle says, thank you. Any other
Sure. Yeah, of course.
questions? If not, we can, uh, for Erica and anybody else that wants an appointment, we can open a breakout room and you can speak with Jack or Octavio and they can help you make an appointment with Savindra. Okay, Keegan, you want to open a couple breakout rooms?
There's two already open.
Okay. Would anybody like to schedule an appointment? We can just put it in the chat or raise your hand. Okay. You can also contact the office. I think Savindra, isn't there something with email addresses?
Yeah, we have our legal assistants that can provide this. Our general email is just office@baylegal.com. You can reach out and somebody can be in touch with you to schedule something when you're available. And If you're interested in learning more about the next steps, also we have our website, baylegal.com. There's information on there to get connected and get moving along with whatever you need help with.
Jack, Yakuri is asking, is there a link? I think the link requires payment. Is there a link we can provide?
Yeah, sure. Let me go ahead and send that to you. Or we can go to breakout room one. Schedule I can schedule you for the appointment. We can go jump to room one.
That way you don't have to, because the link usually requires a payment, but
Yeah.
Jack can bypass it.
Yeah, see you there in room one.
Anybody have any other questions?
I guess I just have one question for anybody that's joining us. Um, what's one thing, like one immigration area that you're interested in, or what kind of situation are you going through right now where you're seeking immigration help? Because I know for me, back when I started the process, the biggest thing was I was a student and I needed to transition from that to green card. And I felt like the information, it was not all clear online. This was before the AI and stuff was big, so we couldn't just get all the answers, fed to us. You actually have to go out and look for it. And I remember one of the hardest things was figuring out how do I go from one stage to the next without messing something up. So I guess if anybody feels comfortable sharing, what area of immigration are you interested in? Is it family based, marriage based, student, employment? What are you really interested in at this time?
Let's see.
Hi, yeah, Erica gave us a response with EB2 visas. That's definitely something, yeah, if you want to talk a little more, definitely you can reach out. Octavio's available
Yeah.
if you need help scheduling something, even just a free consultation that we're offering today. And hopefully we can talk a little more about that soon.
Yeah, we can explore the free scheduling if you like us. To do that, Erica, you can join me in room 2 and I can schedule you for a consultation with Attorney Sivendra.
If anybody is still around, we do have the links on the page here, our email address, our website, and then also, if you felt like you learned anything today, I really appreciate if you could leave me a 5-star Google review. Those not only help me in my personal employment with the firm, but also are a great way for us to know what you actually learned about, what you want to learn more about. So maybe on the next webinar, we can teach you a little more about that specific topic and different other different visas too. So feel free to pull out your phone now. There's a QR code on here. It'll link you directly to our review page. Also, if you have any other questions, you can feel free to reach out to us. And, we really appreciate you attending with us today. And hopefully we'll be able to hear from you soon. And thank you, and just have a nice rest of your day.